welcome back. We have been saying that for an agent to be intelligent, one of the things it needs to do is to create a model of the world it is operating in or the domain that it is operating in and reason with over that model. So, not only must the agent know what is happening in the world it is operating in, it must be able to make inferences from what it gets to know essentially. So, we discussed about inferences a little bit. We saw that there are three kinds of inferences essentially: deduction, abduction and induction. We have also mentioned that most of the time in this course we will be looking at deduction, because that is something which is closer to logic. The other ones are kind of closer to, let us say, psychology and things like that. But we have not yet spoken about the representation aspect, because when we want to represent the world around us, how do we do that? So, we will start by looking at how humans represent the world around us, and then take cues from there to see how we can make a machine represent the world around us, because in the end whatever the machine is doing is for our benefit. So, whatever it is representing must be understandable to us as well essentially. So, let us look at that a little bit. Our notion of the world around us, and this is the Western thought that we are following here. We pick it up in medieval Europe, which started with by adapting the Greek ideas. So, the Christian adaptation of the Greek ideas created a worldview in medieval Europe, and those ideas came from Plato. He said that the creator's ideas are the perfect ideas. In some sense, they represent perfectness in some sense, and both our ideas, human ideas, and the real world that we live in is a corruptible materialization of God's ideas essentially. So, Plato we often associate with ideal, that in the sense that something which is above everyday human activity. So, when you say for example, Platonic love, we basically mean that at some level which is not like romantic or sexual or more down to earth characteristic. Platonic love is kind of pure essentially, and that is because Plato used to talk about these ideas of the creator's ideas or God's ideas, which are kind of perfect, and that what we do and what we think are basically in some sense imperfect approximations of those ideas. So, our thoughts are true to the extent that they are accurate copies of God's ideas. That was the Platonic view, but his disciple Aristotle had other ideas. He said that human ideas are basically a reflection of what we see in the world. So, when we think of an apple, or when we think of a dog, or when we think of a tree, or when you conceptualize a dog or an apple or a tree, we are essentially seeing things as we see them. So, our thoughts are a reflection of what is out there in the world. So, they resemble the objects that they stand for essentially. So, our thoughts are also like that. So, this is called the correspondence theory of truth, and one of the well known philosophers, Ludwig Wittgenstein, had this picture theory of language. It said that words in language, they are like represent pictures of what you are seeing out there. Of course, this is not a detailed accurate description, but that was the basic idea, that what you are talking about and what you see is about what is out there. So, in that view about the world is as we see it to be, the earth was flat because we see it to be flat, and at the center of the universe, because we imagine that the earth is stationary and it is the skies which are going around the earth, with God's heavens rotating around it. The hypothesis that time was, or the theory of matter was, that there are 5 things that everything is made up of, or 5 elements. So, one is quintessence, which is what heavens are made of, which is kind of permanent and not destroyable, and the other stuff is made up of fire, air, water and earth. So, the way we have written them here in this slide is in some sense order of density. So, fire is the least dense, air and then water and then earth, and then they are kind of jumbled up on earth and striving to separate and go to their rightful place. So, everything that we think of, wood for example, has a little bit of air, it has a little bit of fire in it and so on, and so it is lighter than water, and if you put a block of wood in the water, it will float and you can burn it and then the fire will escape from it. So, those kind of ideas have been popular in the ancient worlds, not only in Europe, but elsewhere on earth as well. So, our notion of earth was that it is stationary and the sun and the skies are going around it. So, for example, when the sun is setting as seen here, then the sky turns red and everything becomes like that, and then the sun goes down. So, it means in some sense it goes down below the earth. So, we do not get any light and everything turns dark, and then there is sunrise, everything starts turning red all over again. And of course, during the day the sun is high up in the sky and there is light essentially. So, that was our view of the world essentially. So, here is a small animation that I made to kind of reflect this view, and so we have this heavens going around the earth is stationary in the center. Now, in those times astronomy was the most advanced of empirical sciences, because people needed astronomy because of the fact that they were exploring the world, and it is the stars which guide the sailors for example. And so, that for example, the north star or the pole star is always fixed in one place. So, if you can identify the pole star, then you know which direction is north, and then of course, you can plan your movement essentially. The problem with that was that the motion of planets was difficult to explain. If earth is at the center of the universe and the rest of the skies and the heavens and the stars and the planets, they are all going around earth, then it was becoming difficult to explain the zigzag motion of planets, because if you were to plot the motion of planets with respect to the rest of the stars, they sometimes go along with the stars, sometimes they go in the reverse direction, sometimes they go forward again. Though that motion was difficult to explain. So, people did explain it by imagining that there is a circular gear like thing, and outside there are gears which are also rotating. So, the rim of that gear will sometimes appear to go backwards and sometimes forward. So, they created models like that, and there are physical models of the solar system for example, with the earth at the center, and you can see how the other planets are behaving. So much so that King Alfonso of Spain, and this was in the 13th century, he said that if God had consulted me while creating the universe, he would have received good advice. This whole business of trying to figure out how planets are moving was hard to deal with essentially. And it happened because of our natural assumption that what we see is what is out there. We see the earth, we see it is flat, we see the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, we see the stars rising in the night. So, this whole picture was there. It is only that the planets could not be explained away easily essentially. Why did they have this zigzag motion? Then of course, came Nicholas Copernicus much later, as you can see in the 16th century. he said that what you see out there is what is not really there. He said that the earth is not the center of the universe, but as far as we are concerned, the sun is at the center. The sun is at the center and all the planets are going around sun essentially. So, this is what he wrote in this book called On the Revolutions of the Celestial Spheres. So, what Copernicus did was to tell us that what we see or what we think we see is different from what really there is essentially. So, in some sense he said that we have our mind in which we see things, but unlike the correspondence theory of truth, the mind does not capture the truth as it is. The mind has its own way of seeing things, which is not necessarily the same as how the things really are essentially. So, that is where the idea of the mind came, and then there were other people who followed up with that, Galileo and Descartes and so on. We will talk about them a little bit later when we talk about symbols and how we associate symbols with thought. But for the moment we want to just do a kind of a quick overview of how this all came about. So, next we want to ask, okay, so we want to create a model of the universe in our heads, because that is what we say that an intelligent agent must do. You must have models of your universe or the earth or the domain or the world in your head, and then you should reason over those models, and therefore, you will be able to act intelligently. But what is really out there essentially? So, if you think about the universe and everything, what is there out there? What is the objective reality? That is something that in a way we are still grappling with. But one thing is clear, that everything in the physical world is made up of some small number of fundamental particles. The basic particles are a small number, and the way they combine together, they form other elements and things like that. So, we have metals and other kind of elements, but inside them are a small number of particles. So, there was a time when we used to think that the fundamental particles are the proton and the neutron and the electron, but then people realize that they are themselves made up of smaller particles. So, in fact, we do not even know what are the fundamental particles out of which the universe has been created, but whatever they are, we know that there are some fundamental particles and the world is made up of that, unless of course, there are no fundamental particles, in which case everything is energy, and that kind of corresponds to a theory called idealism, which is a theory which is opposed to materialism. So, materialism says that everything is matter, idealism says that everything is ideas essentially. In any case, we assume that the reality is composed of some fundamental particles. So, let us make that assumption. The laws of physics that explain the behavior of these particles are sufficient to explain the behavior of the ensembles of such particles. So, maybe laws of physics are enough to understand the world, and that is what the people who work in physics are trying to do all the time. But if we want to reason as individuals, we want to reason about our environment, when we think of human beings, because most of the time our reasoning is about human beings. So, we say Socrates is a man, Socrates is mortal and that kind of stuff. But a human being is physically made up of about 10 raised to 27 atoms, and it is not that these atoms are constant, they keep changing. So, it is like a city in which people come and people go, but the city remains. So, in that sense the human body remains, atoms come and atoms go, but somehow we have this entity or existence of the human body. These 10 raised to 27 atoms continuously interact with zillions of surrounding atoms all the time, This happens because of the air we breathe, the food we eat, the vibrations of air molecules in when we hear sounds, the light that falls upon us. Even though light does not have mass, I mean they say that light has photons have momentum. Can we even hope to write down the equations for these and solve them, if you want to understand why a particular human is behaving in a particular way? And what would we get if we did solve them? Essentially a prediction of their location and movement. Remember that there are 10 raised to 27 of them. This 10 raised to 27 is not a number to trifle with. Just try to imagine how big that number is essentially. So, 1000 is 3 zeros, a million is 6 zeros, a billion is 9 zeros or 12 zeros, depending on whether you are an American or you are looking at the European system. Then we have trillion, then we have zillion. 10 raised to 27 is bigger than all these numbers essentially, and it is really a humongous number. There is no way we can manage 10 raised to 27 bits of information about the different atoms in our body. That does not make sense at all. So, we create the world in our minds essentially. We create our own representations of the world. So, physically everything is an ensemble of atoms and molecules and cells and tissues and whatever it is, but we do not look at the world at that level at all. So, as we said, the world around us including us operates according to, in principle, be explained by fundamental laws of physics, but who wants to solve 10 raised to 27 different equations? We are thinking creatures because we create our own worlds, or we as thinking creatures create our own worlds in our minds, and it is only our creation that is meaningful to us. So, when I look at you and say I can see another human being, then I am not thinking of the 10 raised to 27 models atoms that you are made up of. I am thinking of you as an entity. In my mind, a human being is an entity, and I want to think about humans. So, I want to talk about Suresh and Sucheta and Jack and Mary and so on as people essentially. So, we create that impression. When we look at clouds, we think of it as a cloud essentially, though in reality the cloud is made up of condensed water molecules, and even if you see the cloud as stationary, it could be that the air is moving through them and the molecules are condensing at that time and then evaporating again. This could happen, for example, on a ridge or on a mountain top essentially, where the cloud seems to be stationary, but actually the water molecules are moving. So, we like to think in terms of our own creations. This was the ideas that was embodied in films like Matrix and Inception. So, a lot of science fiction ideas draw upon what we know about the world and what we think the world is like. So, if you have not seen Matrix, it is a film in which the main character Neo is actually a prisoner of the robots, and the robots are using him and other human beings to generate energy to power their whole enterprise essentially. And all these people are like, there is a battery of cells and the cells are human beings generating power for them. But Neo thinks that he is a software engineer in New York. So, in his mind he is in New York essentially and doing things away. So, the whole story about Matrix is that how he kind of extricates himself from that state of being a prisoner of the robots essentially. But the idea that I wanted to talk about was that what Matrix showed, and this is also something similar what was shown in the film called Inception essentially, in which you just change the world in which you are operating somehow somebody else does it for you. You are sleeping, and then you are taken into another world, kind of thing, essentially. So, the whole point that I want to emphasize here is that we live in the worlds that our minds create for us, essentially. And of course, we never have a doubt that we are living in the physical world that we are living in, because in practice that is what we are doing. It is just that the physical world we perceive as the way our mind perceives it, whereas in reality it is just a large collection of atoms, behaving in some particular ways. For some reason, these 10 raised to 27 atoms stick together all the time. So, when a human being goes from one place to another, all these 10 raised to 27 atoms go together. So, that is happening, but we do not think of the world in terms of that. We think of the world in terms of how we perceive the world, essentially, and how we perceive the world is how our mind perceives the world. Just think about that, and we will come back to this and look at this again from a maybe slightly different perspective, and that will also give us some clues as to how do we want to represent the world for our intelligent agents, which will do useful things for us, and which includes things like modeling the world and reasoning. So, we will come back and look at that.